Welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Developer Monthly Community Call. This is August 13th. It is Tuesday, August 13th, and today we're gonna have a quick look on the latest news around the SharePoint. So, quick update on certain things, and also around our user voice. And then we do have cool demos coming up. So, quickly explaining what we will have. So, some news, some monthly summary, and other details. So, what's actually coming? What has been released within the last 2 months, actually. Because in July we did not have a SharePoint Dev Community Call because we were all pretty much on the summer vacation. In Northern Hemisphere, it is summer, now it's heading to the autumn side of the house, and people were having some time off. Now, we're going to do acknowledgement of the community contributions in this call as well. I was able to actually get just on the last minute all of the people listed on the slides. It is a massive number again on people contributing within the last month. So thank you for that already advanced. Now, one reminder for anybody who's joining, please remember to mute yourself because again, I can hear some background noise on the audio. Now, and then we will have a really cool demo from Julie Turner. Julie will start around the architecture and design of learning path solution. If you're not aware what is a learning path solution, you definitely want to see this and you want to have a closer look on that one. It is a really cool solution for you as let's say the tenant owner for teaching your employees to use cloud services and Microsoft 365 and Office 365. It's being built using SharePoint Framework and the provisioning techniques what we have. Now, again, Julie will start on the demo section, and then after Julie, we will have at least me and Luca on the call. I'm not 100% sure. Did Pat make on the call yet? Pat might be joining slightly late as well, unless he's already on the call. So we're going to talk about the SharePoint Framework direction. We're going to probably enable the video and have a discussion on between Pat and Luca, and they will introduce themselves. They are actually the people who are making the decisions on the direction of SharePoint Framework. And so basically, I'm just a pretty face, and these are the guys who make all of the magic happen. No, just kidding. I'm not a pretty face, but these guys do make magic happen. Now, so they will do their introductions, and we're going to talk about what is the future of SharePoint Framework. We can't really disclose all of the things what we're building right now, so it's some teasing over there. But let's talk about in broad strokes what's actually happening as well. Also, if you have any questions during the call, please use the iron window. We have plenty of people on the call who can help on the questions if there's anything. And during the last section, it is meant to be also a Q&A based discussion. So if you have any questions on why on earth did you make a certain decision on SPFX, this is actually a perfect time to ask those questions because we have the people behind our SharePoint Framework in the call. And that's also then combining the Q&A section. Now, quickly recapping our community initiatives or community model. So the SharePoint Developer Community obviously is much more than SharePoint. It's also Office 365, Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams nowadays, and all of that stuff. And we'll figure out what that means later in the larger scale. But if you think about just the SharePoint developer ecosystem or the community calls, we have a few different ways of engaging. So we have our community channel in the Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Tech Community, so AKMS SP Dev Community. It is not actually massively active, unfortunately, and that obviously, well, we probably need to be more active there as an engineering team to help people on answering those questions. We do have a bi-weekly SharePoint Framework community call, which is happening bi-weekly on Thursdays. Next one is during this Thursday. We're going to always have updates on the SharePoint Framework, the latest development, live demos from engineering or from the community. And then we do have a bi-weekly SharePoint General Dev, which is everything else except SharePoint Framework and client-side development. So see some .NET Graph within the context of SharePoint, Microsoft Flow, Power Apps in the context of SharePoint, and all of that stuff. And architectural designs, provisioning is then discussed on the second bi-weekly call. So basically, every single Thursday at 7 a.m. Pacific time, and I do apologize if you're in Pacific time frame, that might be a problem for you. But 7 a.m. on a Pacific time, we always have a community call. And then on top of that, we have this monthly community call. We're going to always focus more on the engineering demos and engineering, let's say, influence. We have quite a nice set of engineering people queued up already for the autumn. So there will be more and more discussions from the PM side of the house, explaining where we're heading from a branding perspective or the communication side perspective and all of that during the autumn. The next one is on 10th of September. So that's always on the second Tuesday of every single month. Quite a few goals, but you can always decide which of these you want to go. All of these are getting recorded, so they're getting published on the YouTube channel, where you can always find them typically in 24 hours after the actual session. And if there's any demos like today, Julie's demo is going to be published separately as an own video, so you can easily find that later on from the YouTube channel as well. Now, a few reminders on the assets. AKMS SP DevDocs, our documentation for SharePoint development, on-premises development API documentation, SharePoint Framework documentation, obviously more bets and more investments on SharePoint Framework as that's the future. SharePoint Dev Videos, AKMS SP Dev Videos channel, AKMS SP Dev Issues is the location also to report any issues which you might have found on the SharePoint development, not only on SharePoint Framework, but also on other areas of SharePoint development, because there's no direct support for SharePoint development, at least for now. We're working on areas in this section as well. So let's see if we can figure out a more suitable model in the future. Now, a few numbers from July, or the latest numbers from last month. This is the community monthly metrics. We had on the YouTube, we had 184,000 minutes watch time with 39,000 actual views. Unique visitors on GitHub, 56,000 views in GitHub, more than 250,000. In the docs, we have now 1.2, 1.3 million views in every single month, which is a good number. And that means that we need to keep on obviously making sure that the documentation is always up to date and the best documentation which you can find in the internet related on SharePoint Framework development and SharePoint development in general. We also had some numbers on the BMP reusable components. If we're wondering, is somebody else using the BMP provisioning engine? Answer is yes. There is, again, for that one, there was more than 3,000 tenants where it was used last month. The BMP JS and the BMP NuGet package and the BMP PowerShell overall were used in more than 25,000 tenants. They are using out-of-the-box APIs under the covers, but there are kind of wrappers on top of those APIs, so making your life easier for the development. And we can clearly see that the numbers are growing, so the developers really like them quite heavily as well. Now, quickly looking also about the SharePoint Framework, we can't give you an exact numbers on the SharePoint Framework adoption, but it's still growing quite fast. There is an expected slowdown on July timeframe that always happens in SharePoint Online or in the cloud services due to summer in the Northern Hemisphere, so that always has a small impact, but we can again see the curve starting to go up, and the growth is still there. I think in July we grew something like 3% on the usage, but typically it's around 10% in every single month, which is pretty massive. Currently, the year-over-year growth is in more than 300%, even though SharePoint Framework was released almost 3 years ago. And by the way, even though there's a classic ongoing joke on the SharePoint development that we in engineering, we always come up with a new development model in every single 3 years. We're closing that 3-year marker pretty soon, but I guarantee that we're not going to introduce a new model. We keep on evolving the existing one. You can quote me on that one, and then if I'm wrong, I'm the person to blame on that. Now, a few reminders on the other assets before we go to the demo section as well. Trying to intentionally keep this quite fast. So SharePoint Dev Weekly went live today. It is actually a really nice chat with Mikael Svensson around Mikael's journey. Mikael is a really new principal program manager in the Microsoft Search team. He used to be an MVP for quite a few years, and now he joined Microsoft in the Microsoft Search R&D in Norway, and he talks about the transition and how did it feel to move from the MVP side of the house to the inside of the Microsoft company, and what he's been doing. And there's quite a few again community articles in the SharePoint Dev Weekly video. There is a blog post around this one where we have all of the links to those articles and then discussion points. And then there's a YouTube video where we talk about these things together with Mikael. Good. User voice, SharePoint Dev. Just quick update on this one. I did quite a big cleaning on the SharePoint Dev user voice back in June. So we cleaned up all of those, let's say, classic and really old CSAM requests, which we are not planning to invest. So in practice, the CSAM is something which definitely is supported, but more and more the new APIs are getting introduced through the Microsoft Graph endpoints. So that will be then the location where, for example, the taxonomy API is going to be exposed. And the taxonomy API, which is the #1 request for the dev platform, is definitely being developed. I can't give you a timeline on that one. We've been talking about this one quite a few months already, but it is being developed. It's being previewed right now, and hopefully we'll have some nice news later on this autumn. Support for .NET Core with CSAM currently being also actively worked on. It is also getting more and more pressure internally into engineering, because other engineering organizations are requesting that to happen. So it's getting more priority right now due to many reasons. A lot of the next ones, a lot of around SharePoint framework capabilities, and we're looking into this as well. A lot of this stuff is partly already in the roadmap, and we can actually talk about those things definitely later on in this call if there's any specific requests around those things on the top 10 list. But just to pinpoint one thing, what was actually tackled from here since the last time is the app-only support for creating modern sites. That has been now documented and it is supported. So you can find the documentation in the SharePoint Developer documentation, obviously. And one thing what we will be documenting quite soon, I'm just waiting for a final sign-off, is the number 7, which is provide the ability to manage metadata via app-only policies. So that's going to be helpful for a lot of the daemon services running into Azure. So you're able to then write the taxonomy service based on the app-only permissions in the Azure side. So really good stuff as well. SPFX for Lotus Notes. That would be interesting, by the way. Just watching the chat window on the quickly as well. Now, on the summary, on the August 2019 update, there was quite a few unexpected number of contributions. For example, all of the following contributors. This was the last thing what I was just had time to do before this call started, and to minimize the fonts, making sure that every single name is fitting within the slide. This is getting smaller and smaller all the time, which is good because it means that more and more people are involved, helping each other on making the cloud and making the development succeed. And it's not just about development; it's also about the extensibility in general in the SharePoint Online or in on-premises. So more and more people are being part of this community, and it's a great thing. I think back in, when was it, 4 years ago, when we started the monthly community calls, we actually explicitly mentioned all of these people one by one in these calls. But now it's getting to be such a long list of people that would actually take 2 hours to go through. So, but thank you very much for your contributions on the documents, on the samples, or any of the other areas in our community. And if you're wondering if you want to be involved in this, definitely you're more than welcome to reach out and ask how you can be involved. As an example, David Warner has offered one-to-one assistant for anybody who's actually who's wants to contribute but doesn't feel that has the right skills to make that happen. So David has a social media tweets on that one as well. Thank you, David, by the way, on that. It's quite simple to contribute, but if you obviously you need to have some experience, and David is willing to help on those things. So super helpful. Good. And one point where Kevin actually mentioned on the chat window as well, there's a lot of unfamiliar names here as well. So this is not just about MVPs. This is also people who potentially want to be MVPs, or then people who don't want to be MVPs, but they want to contribute some of their times, a few hours here and there during the month for the benefit of the others in the community, because we're much stronger when we're doing this together rather than competing and trying to learn these things one by one. So sharing the knowledge will help everybody else as well. Good. On the company side of the house, the companies which we have a permission to show the slide, on the Microsoft side, this list is also increasing all the time. So we're getting more and more internal community. People are contributing here as well, which is really good. But watching on the timelines as well, I don't want to take more time on the intros and quick walkthrough on where we are within the community side of the house. Let's actually jump on Julie Turner's screen, hopefully. And then let's have a look on the learning pathways and this really, really, really great solution. So cool to see how it's actually being built. And we can see your screen. Thank you, Julie. Take it away.
Okay, super. Okay, so I'm going to do a Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways architectural overview and do a demo as well. My name is Julie Turner from Sympraxis Consulting. And so to start with, let me just define what it is. So Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways was formerly known as Custom Learning for Office 365, and it's a customizable on-demand training solution designed to help you increase the usage and adoption of the Microsoft 365 services in your tenant. So whatever of the services from Microsoft 365 that you use in your tenant, it helps you to drive adoption for those tools by providing some on-demand learning for your users. And so it's composed of the end user training content, which is product and scenario-based training that's in video or article format. And the way you get it into your tenant is to deploy it from the PnP or the SharePoint provisioning service. And so that's just sort of walking through a wizard, which will deploy the site collection into your tenant, set everything up for you, put the SharePoint framework solution in your tenant, and you would be up and ready to go within minutes. The content is driven from a set of manifest files. And so those manifest files can be updated on a regular basis by Microsoft. And that means that the content that you see and that you can give to your users is constantly refreshed and evergreen, similar to Microsoft 365 itself. We also provide the ability to customize what content you see. So you can hide and show content, playlists, technologies based on what things that you have delivered to your end users in your Office 365 environment. And then you can also create your own customized playlists and assets, which can cover any kind of content that you want. And you can mix and match the Microsoft provided assets with your own assets so that you can get the best learning pathway that you can for your end users. So currently, Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways is in preview. It's been out for about 6 months at this point, and so I wanted to just give you an overview of what the architecture of the solution looks like. So you start with discussing what you have in your own tenant. So in your tenant, you'll have a tenant app catalog, and a tenant app catalog is a site collection where you can deploy SharePoint Framework solutions. So you'll have the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathway solution deployed into your app catalog, and there will be a few tenant app properties that are configured that basically tell the solution where your master Microsoft 365 Learning Pathway site is. So in addition to deploying the solution, you'll have a site collection that'll be your master site collection. And there is also an app property that points to where the content is coming from. I'll point to that in a second. So this Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways site is a master site collection where the admin web part will be deployed, and that admin web part allows you to do all those customizations, hide and show technologies, and different content. And so that can only live in one site collection, in this master site collection. And then you'll also have a viewer web part in that site collection that is sort of the master viewer web part. And then you can place that viewer web part, because it'll be available in the app catalog, or the web part catalog. You'll be able to put that viewer web part in any other site collection in your tenant, and it'll know what content it has available to it based on what you've set up and configured in your admin site collection. So that's how the tenant is set up. And as I was sort of implying, one of the tenant app properties points to where the content lives. And so there's a master repository. And right now we're using sort of a content delivery network light. And I use the term light because we're basically using a GitHub Pages repository to host these 3 JSON files that tell the web part what the content is and how to serve it up and organize it. So there's a manifest.json file that contains all of the categories and subcategories and technologies and various other configuration pieces. So that manifest file then points to a set of playlists, which then points to a set of assets. So these playlists concatenate assets together to give the user various content delivered to them, curated and delivered to them. And so when the admin web part loads, it will download these 3 files and cache them into lists that are stored in that site collection so that you get the best performance. And then once the user is using the viewer web part, the assets that are in the asset.json file point to different documents on support.office.com or docs.microsoft.com. And so it will iframe that content into the viewer web part so that the user can consume them. And so, like I said, that content in the manifests in the content delivery network can be updated at any time by Microsoft, and those changes become visible automatically in your tenant within 24 hours. If you want to, though, you can go into the admin web part, and that forces an immediate refresh. And so as far as customizations go, I was speaking of this before, that your master site collection has this admin web part and the viewer web part sort of already put on pages in that site collection, but that 3 other lists exist. So the first is the custom config list, which caches that manifest.json file that comes from the GitHub Pages library and merges it with any customizations that you made. And that basically provides best performance that we can for the viewer web part, so that the viewer web parts will load really, really fast, especially if you have more than one on a page. Also, it's the list where any customized subcategories that you create are cached, and that is later then remerged with the manifest file. There's then a custom playlists list that has the JSON data for each list item for each custom playlist that you've created, and then the same thing with assets. So if you create any pages that you're going to use in your playlist that are your custom content, each item in the custom assets list will have a JSON package that defines that asset. And so now let's do a demo. So starting with looking at where the documentation is, if you go to docs.microsoft.com and you look up Learning Pathways, you can get right to the documentation that we have on Learning Pathways beta preview out on the site, and it'll direct you to how to provision and set up Learning Pathways in your tenant. The first way is to provision it, and the recommended way is to provision it using the SharePoint Online Provisioning Service. So if you come to the provisioning.sharepointpnp.com and you scroll down to this Solutions section here, and you go to Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways, it'll give you a wizard that walks you through step-by-step to provide the information that it needs to add this solution into your tenant. And what that does is creates the site collection for you, installs the web part into your tenant app catalog, creates those tenant app properties I mentioned when we were looking at the architecture, and creates some pages in that site collection that help you get started creating a learning center in your tenant. The other method is to go to our GitHub repo and follow the instruction for manual deployment, and you'll find all the information about that here in the GitHub repo, and in the web part folder you'll see a README that talks about how to go through and do the manual deployment. This is also where you would get the updated SPPKG file. And so back on the root page here, you can see that there is updating solution instructions. It tells you what the current release version is, so you can compare that to what version is in your tenant when you first deploy, and you can then see the step-by-step process of how to go about updating the solution in your tenant. And it's super simple. You just have to have the right permissions to do it. So that is the one caveat. This is also the place where if you have any questions or issues using Learning Pathways, once you get it deployed, you would come in here. You need to have a GitHub account, and you would sign in, and then you can submit an issue into this repository, and I will try to get back, respond to it as soon as I possibly can, or someone else, depending on the type of question. If you have any issues using the provisioning service, they have a separate SPDev docs area where you would submit your issues with provisioning. So once you've provisioned the site collection, then you get that site collection in your tenant. Here's an example of one where it creates this banner with some menu, nav menuing, and then you would come right to the Microsoft 3 Learning Administration. And that takes you to the Custom Learning Admin page, which is a app part page that has the Learning Pathways Administration web part on it. And you can see here that you have the ability to review all the categories and subcategories and playlists that are available from the manifest file that I talked about, and show and hide the ones that you want or don't want to see. So you can simply click on the hide button, and that will hide that playlist from the viewer web part later. You can also hide subcategories, and go through and do that as your heart's content. You can also go through the technology area, and if, for instance, you're not using PSTN calling, you can hide those technologies in here, and that will hide all content that's been marked with the technology PSTN calling. The other thing that you can do in here is add your own custom subcategories. At this time, we don't allow you to add top-level categories, but you can add your own subcategory in any one of these 4 categories that exist. So you create a new subcategory, you give it a name, and then you save it. And that creates that new category that you can then add your own playlist into. So I can add a custom playlist into this category, or I can go and add a custom playlist into an existing category. So if I create this playlist and give it a technology, and make sure you don't pick a technology you've hidden, or then it's not going to be available. I can also assign levels and audiences, and I'll sort of point to what that might do for you later. And so once you create the playlist and save it, you then can go start adding assets to it. So you can search for existing assets from the manifest that Microsoft provides. And so if I type Excel, for instance, and do search, it's going to search through the technologies and through the categories and subcategories and titles and descriptions of all the assets that already exist for the word Excel. And then you can add any one of these assets into the playlist. You can then also add your own assets. So I could say I want a new asset, and I'll call that PNP demo. And then I can, right from within the web part, create a new page, which is going to create in this site collection a page in there that you can then go edit and put content on. Whatever kind of content that you can add to any SharePoint page, you can add here. Or if you already have a page that's configured the way you want to, whether it be in this site collection or any other site collection, you can just click the enter URL and paste the URL to that page. It's got to be in this tenant, but you can paste it in there. So I'm going to just create the asset page, and so you can see it created in the site page as a PNP demo file based on the title here, and then I can click open page. Will open that page in a new window, and we'll go back to that later because I'll need it for something else. But I can edit this page and add any kind of content. I could add stream videos, I could add, just text and pictures and images and Power BI and anything else I might need to add to create a good asset for my custom playlist. And so then I'm just going to go back over here and set some more information, and I'm going to save the asset. And so now we have two playlists or assets in our playlist, and we've saved that. So we're going to close and come back over here. So like I was saying back in the architecture section, when you come to the admin web part doesn't do any it doesn't look at the cache. It basically, every single time you load this page, it goes to the GitHub repo and downloads all 3 manifest files. So it has the most recent version of it, merges it with any customizations that you've done, and then updates the files in the list on this site collection, the cached files that the viewer uses. So if you know that new content has been released and an update has been made, and you don't want to wait the 24 hours for it to show up by default when the cache expires, you can just come to the admin page and it will reload it and thereby fix everything. And that's also sometimes a way to quickly fix if you've deleted a playlist incorrectly or you had some sort of issue. It's really fast and easy to come over here and just reload the cache so that it's corrected. So now if I go to the viewer web part, I just want to show, what this looks like by default. So we get all of this content here, and since I haven't refreshed, since I hid some stuff, everything is going to be showing. So I'll refresh the viewer page to reload the cache reload the content from the cache, and then we can navigate around. So I am starting with at the home. I have the ability to search, I have an ability to get a link to the page, and I have an ability to see content on the playlist. So when I'm admin, which I am, and I click this, I just get the playlist administration, which takes me back to the custom learning admin page. But if I'm in a playlist, so if I can go into first days, I can see my custom playlist that I created, and I can see the an out of the box playlist. So that playlist loads, and when I look at the burger menu, I can navigate to any one of the assets in this playlist directly, or I can navigate back and forth using the arrows. I can also get a direct link right to this asset in this playlist by clicking this and then copying this link, and then I can send that link off to anybody else, like, hey, I found this thing that tells you how to share and collaborate. Maybe this will help you. The other thing you can do from the web part is do a search. So if I was in here and I searched for, let's say, Excel, similar to looking for assets, this searches all those same fields, and I can see all my assets and then go directly to any one of these assets. So I can go right to adding a chart title so that I can watch the quick video on adding a chart title. And I can also navigate back up the breadcrumbs like this. So that shows us all of the features of the web part. But I did say that you can add this web part to any page throughout your tenant. So if I come back to that PMP demo page, I'm going to use this as an example page, and I and refresh it so I can, there we go, and I can see the edit button now. So if I put this in edit mode and click the add button, I can see that I have the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways web part. And so I can put that on the page, and by default it shows up exactly the way it did on the custom learning viewer page. But we now have some things that we can do, some customizations we can do. Their web part has 2 modes. The full mode has this breadcrumb trail and the search and the link and the hamburger menu right on the top. But sometimes you might want to link right down to a playlist or down to a category or subcategory so that you could put some other content around it and really drive the learning experience. So in that case, you might want to be in content only mode and then specifically say, hey, I want to show a particular subcategory, for instance, and I want to show the first days category. And then when you apply that, you can see that it limits the web part right down to the content that you want to show your users without all the navigation. So when I save this, that's how the web part will look right in the page. Okay, and because I'm an admin, I still have the burger menu. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out that I didn't talk about later is because these 2 pieces of content on here have different audience and different levels, I get this additional level filtering. So I can say, hey, I'm an end user and I only want to see the content for an end user. Okay, so that was the overview, and so I just wanted to put these links up on the page so that you could get started on your own. So first is the link to the provisioning service, provisioning.sharepointpmp.com, and then that documentation that I pointed to. You can also just go to docs.microsoft.com and type in learning pathways, and it will take you right to that same spot. And then again, if you need support of any kind or help with learning pathways, you want to go to our GitHub repo, which is github.com/pnp/custom-learning-office-365, and that will be a place where you can submit issues and get help. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie, on that one. It is a great solution, by the way, and it definitely provides value, because the whole point of the solution is like Julie showed, is that you're able to surface the Microsoft-driven training content inside of your intranet in the SharePoint Online, but then also enhance that existing Microsoft-driven content. So you can actually add your company-specific content on top of it, so on top of the Excel material which is coming from Microsoft. So this way, you get free content from Microsoft to learn for your employees, but then you can still manage how it's being presented and how it's and what's missing. So really, really great stuff. So let's actually start. So let's move on the discussion. I just wanted to quickly give an opportunity for both of you to introduce yourself, related on what's your role. Let's start with Luca, because then we go to the dinosaurs after Luca, right? But just kidding.
So
Luca,
that's an interesting comment, because in theory, I've been more in SharePoint.
That is true, actually.
Microsoft than Pat.
That is true.
But Pat is older than me. So it depends. How do you see that?
Yeah, and I need to be clear on this one. We do work together with these two persons on the day-to-day basis, so I'm not insulting them.
Oh, just for the record, guys, we have been known for 17 years, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
So it's just like an old couple. We look at each other just like, damn it, pass me the butter, and yell at each other, and then we still love each other, but that's okay. Anyhow, welcome.
No, excellent. So let's actually start with you, Luca. So when did you join Microsoft, and what's your role related on SharePoint Framework? So what are the things we can blame on you on that one?
Of course, you can, just like you said before, you can blame on me on everything, and and then I will blame on you, so that's fine.
That's fine.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luca Bandinelli. I've been in Microsoft for almost 20 years, which is a lot of time. Started in Microsoft Consulting Service back in 2000 in Italy. Then the first gig was basically building the support readiness for Tahoe. That's what it was. So look at that. Then after that, I moved at Europe level with what was called the SharePoint Rangers. Was one of the few SharePoint Rangers together with Vesa at one point in Europe, and Kimo and Aku. And then moved to the product group, where I built the SharePoint CAT team. Then I built the Office 365 customer advisory team. And now I am in the SharePoint Framework Dev Crew, and I am the PM of SharePoint Framework. What it means is that the official description is I work as part of the feature crew in order to be able to design the right feature and functionalities, providing the feedback and the customer angle to the engineers so that the engineers can build great software. In reality, I beg Pat and his crew to try to listen to me and do a little bit of what I like to do, and they do whatever they want, and they always win.
One way of putting that. So that's a good definition of our engineering process, right, Pat?
Absolutely.
Do you want to do a quick intro to you as well?
Sure. So I'm Pat Miller. I'm the dev manager or engineering manager, dev lead for the SharePoint framework. My background, company I worked for in Vancouver got bought by Microsoft in 2001. We became content management server, did that for a couple of releases, then replatted and rewrote it to run on top of SharePoint for the 2007 release. I did the page model, navigation, caching stuff for that. Then I did the taxonomy system for a release or two, did some search stuff. and then joined the developer platform team and made SPFX.
Now, and that's good intro. We have 13 minutes, so just I'm not going to spend too much time on the historical things, but obviously we are working kind of together, Pat and Luca more closely because they're physically on the same office, and then I'm the third person yelling from this side of the pond on random things, right? And is that right way of actually?
We yell to each other as well, even if we're in the same office.
No? That's fair. That is fair. But now, if you think about the SharePoint framework, so there's 3 questions which came actually on the chat window already. And if there's any questions which people are interested to ask, just feel free to use the window. I'm catching those as we talk. Now, if we think about SharePoint framework, we are now waiting for SharePoint framework 1.9 to get back released, which is one of the things. That's probably one of the questions which people would be asking already. That I want to use library components. I want to go to GA and production with them. When is 1.9.1 coming out?
Okay, yeah, so 1.9.1 should come out this week. We found one other hiccup with the new Edge Chromium browser and the local workbench that we're trying to see if it's a quick fix. I realize there's some people using that, but it's not a released browser per se. So we'll see what the issue is around that, and then we'll get it out. So it should be quite soon this week.
Yep. So hopefully by end of this week. And by the way, we have agreed internally in engineering that we do not ship on Friday. So even though every single week we are always debating about that one. Now we don't want to ship it until it's working. Sorry.
I was just saying, I'm still waiting for that shirt.
Yeah, I'll get you the shirt when the next time I'm in Redmond, definitely. Do not ship on Friday. Now, exactly. one of the things, if we think about SharePoint framework, it's now 2.5 years old, which is actually kind of cool. We're closing into the third year, and what is both of your kind of a take on this random discussion point where people are always saying that Microsoft comes out with a new developer model in every single 3 years? Will that happen this time?
Oh, you didn't tell that? Of course we are not. So no, and Pat, please chime on that. Sure. But we are completely dedicated and committed on the SharePoint framework, and as I hope you guys are seeing, there is very much intentions and actions to expand the broadness of SharePoint framework above and beyond SharePoint. We released the Teams integration later. I mean, at one point this year, we worked with and still working with the Office client and Office web client team in order to be sure that there is an evolution on Office add-ins that include the SharePoint framework. We teased some preview on SPC last time in May. So absolutely, not only we are committed, but we are also working very, very hard to consolidate SharePoint framework across Office and Microsoft 365 so that we can adjust and evolve the framework itself to be able to fulfill more and more requirements and scenarios.
And anything you want to add there, Pat? It's just that I'm not jumping on the...
No, that seems pretty reasonable.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Ship it. Okay. Ship it. Yes. Now, and obviously, there's always the discussion, like Paul is in the chat window saying that when do we want to be renamed that, and when is it renamed? And that's actually a marketing decision. So we're not going to actually talk about the timings of potential renaming and alignments at this call. But I think the number one thing to remember is that we keep on investing. Actually, we're increasing the investments on SharePoint framework. For me, last week, I noticed a user voice entry where somebody was saying that somebody from Microsoft said that SharePoint framework is now ready and we are reducing the investments. Which is no. It's not definitely ready. Or is it, Pat? What's your thinking on the future of SharePoint framework?
Ready?
Yes.
Ready for what?
What
exactly. What does that mean? Precisely. Now, coming back on a few of the questions what we're having on a chat window. So there was one question related on the kind of an interesting dimension on the questions. Well, more and more people are moving on also in on premises on the SharePoint 2019 platform. And then there was a question related on SharePoint framework and the site collection app catalogs. And why is there any specific reason why the site collection app catalogs are not supported? Or why did we choose to use 1.4.1 and apparently we are not going to upgrade that version? Well, what would be the reasoning behind of that? I can obviously mention that as well, but
sure.
Luca.
So I'm trying to find that question in the chat, but that's fine. So why did we choose 141? Or
that wasn't specifically on the question. Question is more on the app catalog, but
okay.
Since we're talking about the on-premises, I think it's good to cover that.
Sure. So effectively what happened on the on-prem release was the entire organization took a snapshot at a specific time and said, this is what is going to be part of the 2019 release because that's been running, it's been stable. And then we package that up and do more validation testing, do the work on top of that to make sure that it doesn't have the service tendrils and stuff in it. And the feature set at that time was 1.4 and app catalogs weren't there and extensions I don't think were there either.
They are in 1.4. They were released in 1.3.
Extensions?
Yes.
Okay, I thought 141 was the beta for extensions, but maybe not. Fair enough. Whatever stuff was there is what is shipped, and so to upgrade or to bump just the SPFX version to 1.9, let's say, does require a bunch of server changes as well and app changes, and it's sort of a cascading thing that's not something that the SPFX team can do. It has to be something that the entire organization has to do because the ramifications are that everything has to get updated.
Yes, and that would kind of between the lines. Yeah, that you're answering the question between the lines, and we can pretty much say that we're not looking into upgrading the SharePoint framework version for SharePoint 2019. That's what it means, basically, what Pat is saying, because the implications of changing the version would be too dramatical, and that would require basically a rewriting of the SharePoint 2019. So it's not an option for us, unfortunately. We would love to do that, though. So. Now, there was a question from also related on SP HTTP patch components, and I'm looking into getting that to GA soon. That was from Oliver Seisinger.
So Oliver had a couple questions there we can talk about. So the first one is easier to answer, which is the socket.io. I can't remember what the actual component is called. There we go. List subscriptions, GA. So I believe that should be coming soon. The reason why it wasn't GA to begin with is that the API that it's based on in the back end wasn't GA. And so shipping our component as GA when it's based on a beta endpoint didn't seem like the right thing. I believe that the endpoint is out of beta. So basically, as soon as the endpoint is out of beta, we'll remove our beta dev preview flag on it, and it'll be GA.
Yep.
As for the batch, so we spent some time with the community talking about the HTTP client batch and making that go GA. Right now, there's a couple problems with it, with how it deals with nested promises and promises not getting resolved, which is a bad pattern. And so we had a couple different solutions for how to do that changes the API to some extent. But honestly, the feedback we got from most people was you need to support batching more richly on the backend APIs before you ever put it on the client libraries. And so that's sort of where the stumbling block is right now for that to go live.
Good, that's good. Now we need to rush on some of the questions. There was a kind of combined question related on open source out-of-the-box web parts or open sourcing the Yeoman generator. Not on the same question, but it's around open source topics. Any plans on those?
So yes, on the generator, that's something that we have control over. And that's on our list of things to consider. We're not opposed to that in any way. The first-party web parts, open sourcing them becomes a bit more tricky. We can't just open source what we have right now because it's full of I don't know, internal telemetry and monitoring and that sort of stuff, which wouldn't make any sense or be compilable. I don't know what the story is for that. Yeah, I will on that one. Other than, hey, here's some more advanced examples of what's being done. But as far as, hey, this is what we're shipping and keeping it live and up to date and shipping what is in the public repo and stuff, that I don't.
Yeah, I'm going to actually get John Sanders on the September monthly call, so we can talk about John Sanders owns all of the web parts in the out-of-the-box SharePoint Online. So. And then extensions in the local workbench. Any plans on enabling that development? That was from Gautam.
I mean, it is on the list of things. It's not. I'll be honest. It's not particularly high on the list of things. The future of that. Does it make sense to have extensions there? What extensions do you actually mean? If it's simply, hey, we have the top placeholder and bottom placeholder, that's one thing. If it's, can you support list customizations in the workbench, that's a huge chunk of work, because now it also means that we have to have all the list infrastructure in the workbench. And at that point in time, you're kind of shipping an offline version of the lists and libraries. And I'm not sure if that's the right long-term decision.
Yeah. Good question. Then we have few kind of let's say content management related. What's the SharePoint framework's role in the biggest game? SharePoint framework is the UX development capability in SharePoint Online or in on-premises. So everything what we see is being built on SharePoint framework using third party, developed by first party, which is the engineering, or developed by third party, which is the community, so customers and partners. Now. Just looking into any specific questions there. We are, though, also running out of time. So I think it's actually time to close up. Now, I'm curious on also hearing after this call, is this interesting discussions? And is this something where we should book more time on having an open discussion with the people from engineering on the specific ownerships? So we could actually have a potentially separate community call, so separate AMAs around the people who own specific functionalities in the SharePoint, because that would then give more insights on where we're heading and why we're heading, and also understanding the decision implications. Because I think even though you would be an external consultant, it's probably valuable to understand the reasoning behind of the decisions, which is definitely a good thing. So please do give us feedback on that one, and I already see some on the chat as well. But okay, we are running out of time, so thank you, Luca and Pat. Not a super long chat. Thank you for both of you on introducing who you are. These are the people who are running the day-to-day program in the engineering side on making things happen. Obviously, there's a larger group of engineers than writing the actual code, because PMs are not allowed to write any code. Pat, you are allowed to write some code, right?
Occasionally.
Yes.
Not much though. I just ask questions.
And thank you, Julie, for the great demo around the learning pathways that was built using SharePoint framework. So really cool application as well. But thank you, everybody, for joining. The video recording will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. And we'll definitely release Julie's demo as a separate one. But thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your input. And please keep on the feedback coming around what we do. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.